you know.
Yeah. With us right now is Dan Allweiler from Sterling Financial Advisors, the president of that firm. Good to see you, Dan.
Good to see you again, Ken.
And this is the time of the year that people
always exciting.
Maybe say not so nice things about the IRS, but we're going to talk about.
I don't know. Is there ever a good time to talk about the IRS?
Yeah, there probably isn't. But we're going to talk about ways to get a date with the IRS.
Flags.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's a good point to go over because sometimes people don't exactly know, and every once in a while, maybe somebody does something year after year after year, and all of a sudden they wonder why am I getting audited?
There's two aspects to this. One is knowingly doing something that's wrong, okay, and then innocently doing something that's perhaps not appropriate.
Exactly.
You know, I think where you get into the most trouble is when you knowingly are trying to avoid or evade taxes. I've always told people in our seminars, there's nothing wrong with tax evasion. I mean tax avoidance.
Right.
There's something wrong with tax evasion.
Yeah, exactly.
We can do all we can to avoid paying taxes legally, but evading taxes is where you get into trouble.
Exactly, yes.
And so, you know, they've come up with these things that will probably raise the red flag fairly quickly if you do them on your tax returns. And I thought it might be good to go over a few of these that would probably keep people out, as you say, making a date with the IRS.
Exactly. One of them, and it's something you hear about now and then, of people having accounts in the Cayman Islands and all this kind of stuff. Offshore tax.
Had a gentleman in yesterday.
Did you really?
Yeah,
wow.
had a gentleman in yesterday. Came in from one of our seminars, and we got talking about everything. He says, I watch every penny that I've got, and he says, oh, by the way, all of my assets are offshore. Well, my wheels start to turn.
Yeah.
I says, well, just be careful. And he says, well, this isn't tax evasion, it's liability. Okay, he's got fairly significant assets.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it to avoid taxes, he's doing it to avoid liability in case there's a business issue where he's sued or something like that.
Exactly.
He says, I pay all my taxes, I declare everything, I make sure the IRS gets their forms. And he says, I'm doing it to avoid liability in a lawsuit, not to avoid taxes. And that situation's a little bit different.
Right, exactly.
Where you run into problems with offshore accounts is when you're trying to hide assets from the IRS or you're trying to hide income. You're not reporting things appropriately and things like that.
Exactly, yeah.
So, you know, your accounts in the Cayman Islands, we've got to get straightened up for you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. My bag of pennies I have there. Here's one that I think really kind of confuses people in a way, charities. And, you know, one of the things when I was looking over this, I think every year, you know, you might give stuff to Goodwill and things like that. You kind of keep it consistently, at least we have, a certain range. But if something stands out one year, and it may be 100% legitimate,
the red flag goes up. All of a sudden you've given, you know, thousands of dollars to a charity for some reason, and they want to make sure that the charity is an appropriate charity.
Right.
I've had people sit in my office and says, well, my children are charities because I keep giving money to them all the time. Well, that's not appropriate, you know.
Exactly.
And so there has to be a 501c corporation that's filed with the IRS. And, you know, every year in our year-end Christmas event, we sponsor a charity.
Yes, you do.
Okay, and so we raise funds for them. This last year we did Make-A-Wish Foundation for Orange County. And so when people give donations to them, they're a legitimate charity, and there's no questions. Where you get into problems is when you try to start creating your own charities, or it's you know, it's really a shady type thing, or your accountant or CPA says, hey, I have this charity over here, we can get you some good tax deductions, and it's really not an appropriate established
What about a
charity.
nonprofit versus a charity? Is there a difference there? And what I mean by that is they're not a charity, but you know, they're.
You know, I'm not a tax guy, so I'm not sure the difference between a nonprofit or if it's a charitable contributions to a nonprofit. I would imagine if they're, as long as they're legitimate in filing.
And they have that code or whatever it is.
Yeah, the 501c code for their name. So generally, any legitimate charity will be able to give you their 501c tax ID number.
Right.
Okay.
That's true.
That you can use. If they don't have that, be awfully careful about that. And don't inflate your charitable contributions.
Yeah.
I gave this old couch to Goodwill, and I'm deducting $3,000 when you couldn't sell it on eBay for $50.
Yeah.
Type of
That's
thing.
a very good point.
So you've got to be careful about inflating that. But if cash contributions to your church or Make-A-Wish Foundation or whatever it is, those can be substantiated very easily with a canceled check or whatever it might be.
Okay, abusive tax structures.
That's where somebody's going to reduce your taxes because they're going to eliminate your taxable income by setting up an LLC who's owned by an S corp, who that S corp is owned by an LLC. So they're trying to hide ownership of income.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you try to hide ownership of income, the IRS is pretty good at looking through those organizations, getting back to the individual who owns those. And so when you have an accountant or somebody says, hey, I can get you down to zero taxable income by owning different corporations and everything, just be careful about that. The IRS is good at looking through those things.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you've been giving income, if you've been having taxable income of $100,000 for the last 10 or 15 years, and then you have zero, all of a sudden they're going to wonder why.
Yeah.
So just be careful that a lot of different LLCs or S corps aren't trying to hide assets or income.
Okay, fuel tax credit, and this is something that sometimes people ask about because they may drive a hybrid or a motorcycle or whatever it might be. And this is different than if you go out and buy an electric vehicle and there's a legitimate tax deduction.
Absolutely. Your motorcycle isn't a fuel tax, or there's just, be legitimate in the things that you do. And these are just some of the issues. Some of the other ones that you want to make sure of is you have people not filing income taxes based on religious reasons. Yeah. Or
the frivolous arguments.
The frivolous arguments, of saying, well, our tax system is a voluntary system, so I volunteer not to file my tax return. Well, it is a voluntary, but the government has a right to tax us as well.
Yeah,
Filing a tax return is not voluntary.
Right.
Okay, and so you just have to realize that you can go to court over filing taxes based on religious reasons, but you're probably going to lose.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so the whole thing with tax avoidance versus tax evasion is intent. What is your intent? Well, I intended, I took a deduction for $2,500 on this china cabinet I gave to Goodwill, and ended up being worth $1,500. Okay.
Yeah.
The intent was not to avoid, to evade.
That's a good point.
It was an honest mistake, and so there's not as much, retaliatory. Situation.
They'll want what's owed to them.
They'll work with you. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So you just have to be careful about the intent of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly.
If you own a business car and you're claiming that you drove 25,000 miles and yet you can only prove that you drove 15, that's intent.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? So you've got to be careful on that.
Yeah, and going along with that, you make a very good point that people may be working part of their time out of their home and all that. Well, they have to really look into. Well,
then they claim a home deduction, office deduction out of their home. That's another red flag for the IRS.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it may be legitimate, but you got to back it up.
But like I said, I'm not a CPA. I don't get into those details. I just have been around long enough to know what's going to raise the red flag. So if you claim 50% of your mortgage as an office deduction, they're going to come in and they're going to say, justify this.
Yeah.
And if you've got a little desk in a corner, in your living room, that's not 50% of your house.
Yeah, exactly.
Type of thing.
We got just about a minute left,
okay.
So I want to quickly just touch on two things that are always important.
Okay.
Phishing scams and identity theft, particularly phishing scams. The IRS does not send out emails and go, hey, how are you doing? By the way.
Or they don't call you on the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
I've gotten calls on the phone saying, hey, you owe us $1,200, and if you don't do it, we're going to put a lien on your house. And I'm thinking, good luck.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm compliant with what I'm doing, you know. And
Exactly.
so if you get a email that looks official, or you get a phone call that says we're representing the IRS,
Yes.
okay, that's not how they communicate.
No.
They communicate through registered letters.
Yes.
They'll send it out regular mail for the first part.
Yeah.
And then if you don't respond to that, then it'll come registered mail. And then if you don't respond to that, that's when you get in trouble.
Exactly. All right, Dan's website, sterlingfa.com, and the number is 949-859-8900. And give him a call. You know, you ever want to just sit down with you and go over your
overview or whatever
investments
they might
and
be,
things. Yeah, he's a good guy, believe me. And he does some fun stuff as well with his clients. So
we do.
Thank you very much.
All right, good to see you.
Take care.
All right, take care.
We're just out of time, so we'll see you Monday.